Welcome to the Story Studio podcast. We're going to get in all our Dave jokes before he comes back.
Do you think he went number one or two?
Silly Dave. I like how he thinks he's not going to have. We're not going to have worst show ever just because his family's home. You were
That's
so going
always
to
a
have worst show
terrible
ever.
assumption. And when he says I can't talk because my family's home, isn't that code for this is going to be really, really funny?
Right. It really is. So I thought we'd do an episode on sort of our writer's journey. I think like we all kind of got to this through different ways, and we've told our backstories before, but just kind of where we are now and what we've learned.
Yeah, I love this topic because it's been a long 7 years. And I think that it's really easy.
Do you know how long it's been? 7 years. That's how long of a 7 years it's been.
It's been 7 years, which, I mean, seriously, dude, doesn't that kind of strike you as like, holy shit, that's a long ass fucking time? I mean, Yesterday's Gone, episode 1, was 7 years ago. That is a really long time. So that means that 7 years ago, I was starting to leave copywriting. We were, Sterling and Stone was a couple of months away.
I was a little behind because I think that I was writing Fat Vampire around this time in 2000.
A year later,
2012.
Yeah, but even so, 6 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is a long time.
Well, and I'd written a whole book beforehand. I have a longer history than you do. It just didn't get formal.
So at that point, like we've seen a lot of ups and downs, and even within the company, we've had each of our own ups and downs. Johnny and I together have a trajectory. Dave and I together have a trajectory, and then individually, each of us have a trajectory as far as writers and craftsmen, and kind of the way we've told stories and our own writing. So I thought like it might be a good idea for us to kind of just dig into that a little bit, because there's people who are just listening now and they're just kind of starting out their journey. There's people who've been at it for a couple of years, and there's people who've been at it for as long or almost as long as us. And I think there are seasons to this kind of thing. I think your mood changes. I think your interest wanes, or, so how is it that you can kind of circle back and find your enthusiasm again and find your joy? And, it's probably a good time all these years later to sit there.
We can talk about longevity too at this point. I think that 6 or 7 years in self-publishing world counts as longevity, right? I mean, we're not 30-year writers yet.
No, but we're career writers at this point. I mean, it is what all of us do, and
increasingly so. Something we mentioned in the last episode was that Sean was saying I need to make time to watch movies in the morning or something, and you were like, I'm actually not kidding, and I said, I know you're not kidding. Like, immersing ourselves in story, like we need to carve out time to read and to watch movies, and those are things that we need to do, is turning more into story, because we are purely a story studio.
Yeah, I don't think I would do it first thing in the morning like I did in Denver, because that's when I'm freshest. That's when I can make things. That's when I can create. But like all the smarter artist related meetings that basically occupied Monday through Friday from 2 o'clock to whatever, wouldn't that be more awesome if I was watching movies and creating more story?
Right, we could have a Sterling and Stone day once a week or something. Let's go watch a movie.
Right, and then break it down, or we're going to write books about robots, so let's spend the next 12 weeks watching a robot movie and talking about it each week. Like, that's the kind of thing we want to get into. But anyway, that's all beside the point. The point is we've all had very specific writers' journeys, and they all are very different. And we've focused a lot on, all three of us, where we began. But I think right now, for the purposes of this discussion, it should be, where were we 6-7 years ago? Like, it's not the Bialy Pimps, the 12 years that it took, or any of, like I'm going to develop my own audience and learn copywriting, and Dave, writing Available Darkness since high school. None of that. So since 2012-ish, what has been the journey like for each of us?
The journey, and what have we learned? I feel like I have, amongst the three of us, I probably have the freshest, most unique perspective regarding getting going again, because we did an episode not that long ago about, I was kind of in a slow spot. You mentioned seasons. So I recently have gotten out of that slow spot. And so there are things that I knew and then I know again, but that your eye sees it again when you have to reacquire it. And so I think that we're all going to have those things where we've learned things that we already knew, but it's another. So anybody listening to this might take it as new. I don't know if that makes any sense. Well, I guess I might as well go since that didn't make a lot of sense. I'll mention that these are actually
talking, Johnny.
Yeah, this isn't really journey.
It'll make sense.
This isn't really journey, but this is, I mean, it is kind of the most recent part of the journey is realizing the importance of flow and confidence. So I was writing stuff during the period of time that I was having trouble writing, that I was, go back a few episodes in Story Studio. I was writing, but the words weren't very good, and it never felt like, it felt like scooting along like a slide that is horizontal rather than one that goes down and you go wee.
Or so like a dog when he scoots on the floor wiping his butt in the carpet.
Right. I could make progress, but it required all of my forepaws with my ass dragging and leaving a streak. But usually it's like you get going, at least for me, I get going and then it gets easier. I get into a scene, and there was none of that. And so I don't exactly know how to recapture it other than just brute force, or not brute force, persistence. So as I was more persistent, then there was like, okay, there's that state again. There's that state where I understand what's going. And for me, it begins to stop looking like me telling a story and it starts looking like me witnessing a story. So at the beginning, it's of a scene especially of a book, I need to do like logical thought, like what feels like, I guess it's creative right brain thought, but it feels very mechanical. It's like, how do I make this story happen? But once the scene gets going, then I'm just watching it. I'm just like, oh, okay, I know what's going to happen. That person's going to do this. That person's going to do this. Especially action scenes or fight scenes or arguments, they just kind of spool off. And rediscovering that, I don't know how to say that I'm rediscovering it other than that I just had to be persistent and kind of keep going. But with it comes confidence. So, Sean, I actually didn't mention this to you, but I was thinking about this when we were talking about confidence recently, is there was a project that I started writing, and it should have been the easiest, most fun project. And it wasn't. Like, it was really, that's how I knew something was wrong. Because this project of all projects, I couldn't blame the project. It was clearly me.
No, you could never blame this project ever.
And so, but I was writing it very hesitantly. I was like, okay, does this make sense? And let me reread these passages. And so what I think I decided is that when I go back to that, I'm probably just going to kind of scrap it. I think I'm just going to write it again.
Oh, wow.
Because you can't, I mean, I'll probably keep, like, there are 2 scenes that I'm thinking I'll probably keep. But you can't, like, I wasn't confident in it. And I think that I can go into it now and just kind of punch it in the face. So confidence and flow are 2 things that that isn't really journey, but those were things that I had to get and I had to relearn.
No, something that I've learned recently that I kind of, like, it was on the edges, but I don't know, I've been really intentional. So I guess it's my turn.
Well, it's just kind of a free-flowing thing.
Yeah, well, okay. So I've written a lot in the last couple of years, but I haven't written straight rough drafts. So I'm always in copy. I mean, I'm a storyteller, and I'm, part of all the stories that we tell at this point, although that won't be forever. But at this point, I'm still knee deep in everything that we do. And so I'm in a lot of stories, but I haven't been, writing a lot of stories, working from an outline where now I'm in charge of the rough draft. And I started that in May, and I've written every single day since then. I've written, I don't know, over 250,000 words since then. And I'm writing well. So the difference is I used to write a little faster than I am now, but my rough drafts would be a lot sloppier. I think I'm writing really clean drafts. I'm writing, I'd say, about like Johnny level clean at this point. And I've never really managed to do that before, not with any speed. There are always things I had to severely go back over, and I'm not right now. But what I have noticed, and this is the confidence thing, is that the earlier I write, the more confident I am in my words.
Earlier in the day.
Earlier in the day.
That's true of me too.
So if I write later, which I do. Like if I get pulled into a phone call or a story meeting or anything, I'm really good about getting my words in these days. And so that means I may have to do it after dinner. All right, if I have to sit down for a sprint and get a few hundred words after dinner, they're slow and they don't suck, but I'm pretty sure they suck until the next day and I go back and look at them. I'm like, fucking, I hate this. This is so, so terrible. And the other day I was having like just a miserable day because I was trying to get my words in, and it was the last sprint of the day. It was like 5 o'clock right before dinner. And I was just really doubting every single thing that I wrote, and pretty much assumed I was going to have to just rewrite it in the morning. But I'm okay with that, because whatever, at least I got my words in, and that kind of momentum is important to me. So the next day I open it up, and sure enough, like, they were fine. Not only were they fine, they were really good. I was really pleased. I had to introduce the character and describe him in a certain way, and I was really happy with the way it all went down. But it doesn't matter. The point is, later in the day, I get in my own head. So the reality that these words are fine doesn't. I'm not believing that. All I'm thinking is, this is terrible. The person I'm going to have to pass this off to is going to be disappointed in me. Like, it's not good. You get in your head. But if I wake up at, and I'm at the words at 5:30 in the morning, I'm confident, I'm fast. And so I'm really in tune to my cycles. And I know that I've just got, the earlier, the better for me getting the words in. The earlier I start, the more confident I am. The later I am, the opposite is true.
I want to hear what Dave has to say on any of this. Have you grown as a writer in the past handful of years?
Not at all. No, I think I've gotten better at dealing with the frustrating parts of it, a little bit better anyway. As far as finding a schedule, it's odd that we're talking about it right now because we're just ending summer, and for me,
yeah, that's fucked with my schedule.
Me too. Yeah,
fucking difficult. And this is the first week my son's been back to school, but it's one of those weeks where my sleep schedule, because summer is just all off. So I've been dragging ass all week. So next week, I imagine I'll be feeling more productive and back in the swing of things. But right now, I'm not exactly feeling it. So the fact that we're doing this episode right now is just kind of ironic.
Do you want to do it again next week?
Yeah, we should do it every week.
Just how is Dave doing this week? That's probably a pretty great way to. We could do a whole podcast on just checking in with you. Yeah, actually, it really is.
But I've definitely, we just finished White Space season 3, and that was I think it was only a week past deadline, which might be my record.
It is your record, at least since the old days. But yeah, it is.
And so I think I did all right on that. I'm not positive, but yeah, it's way better than Available Darkness, which felt like it took a whole year.
Yeah, that was Available Darkness took 9 months, which is a really, really long time. White Space
it doesn't sell.
Well, that's exactly where I was going. White Space is more commercial and better quality written with less time. And that is absolutely what I am finding. There is no link between, we already knew this, but there's no link between the speed of writing and how good it is. And I think Johnny's found that especially. Like, that's what he's saying about the thing that he had to quit because, oh my God, this isn't even fun. This should be writing like the easiest thing in the world. And so it's taking him longer. That doesn't make the words better. And I know I can look at our catalog.
No, it makes the words worse for me.
Right. Yes. And I can look at our catalog, things I've written personally, things I've written with Dave, things I've written with Johnny. And I know that the harder projects don't read as well. They just don't. They do not. The times where we have spent a long time on something versus breezing through it on a copy level, that doesn't mean post-production. Post-production is something different. Post-production can take a long time. The big literary thing that's kind of incubating right now between Johnny and I, that's a little different. Like that has a lot of production.
Well, it's about flow. It's not about speed. It just happens that those tend to correlate, at least in us. So if I'm in flow, I write faster. But I
Yeah.
suppose it's conceivable that somebody else could be in or in the zone or whatever you want to call it, and write slow. It's just, that's not the way I work.
I think it's just a confidence with the story. And for me, like if I'm not confident in the story I'm telling, or there's something, if I'm writing it and there's a problem that I know is still out there that I haven't figured out, it bothers me, and it seeps into the words. And I don't like those little things out there, and it really fucks with my flow. I do think one story that did take a while, Yesterday's Gone season 3, just because it was so damn difficult. I still think that was good, although I haven't reread it, so I don't know. I think that might be one instance where it was very difficult, but I still think it came out all right.
Yeah. So what about structure? Because I know that there was that whole story that we've told a few times where Dave, you said, I don't understand structure. And then Sean said, yeah, you do intuitively. And then Sean has, in his Sean way, trumpeted, I fixed Dave. So I'm curious whether you feel fixed, like in that specific, I'm being facetious, but in that specific way, do you?
Yeah, I'm paying much more attention to structure, and I feel that it's helping it. There's still some things that I'm working on structure-wise, and with a character arc and all of that I feel I don't know. It's like I feel like some of that was missing from some of our earlier stuff, but it didn't always matter. I'm basically like thinking of like these quote rules that are in place that I ought to be following.
Well, you know why it didn't matter, dude? Because we were doing a lot of serial. And with serials, because you don't have to tie those arcs up. So it really is about, how much movement there is. Are our characters believable? Because what we've always done, I think you and I pretty intuitively, is just solid characters, good dialogue, believable people, believable situations. But it's different in a standalone novel where everything has to make sense and your climax really does have to tie into your character motivation, which is something that Bonnie's really, hammered home for us. But when you're doing serials, it's not the same. You don't need to tie everything up, but like you're working on a standalone right now. So that's essential. If you want that book to be, really, really perennial, then that's essential. And that's what we're talking about with Area 51 right now, which is our marketing department, is exactly that. We had a discussion yesterday, Johnny and I, with Area 51, and talking about how CI stuff is a little bit more difficult to market. And there's a few specific reasons for that. It's a little quirky. And it's kind of funny to say that compared to Realm and Sands, which is super quirky. And, but that's because we haven't had our attention on those things. And now we do. And so I know for me, I am, like I said earlier, I'm writing faster for the quality than I ever have in my life, and I'm getting all my words in, but that is because my outlines are really solid and I have a lot of support there. Fortunately, I'm in a situation where, Jen is helping me with outlines. I can't even say helping me. They're half of the story. And, Bonnie story jackets they're not just thorough. They surface the best of what that story can be. So when I'm actually sitting there to tell it, it's really just, it's like what Johnny said, the story just kind of takes over. I'm just there reporting. And that's a really good place to be. And it's where we want to get all of our writers. But
how do you think you cultivate it? Because my answer, and I don't know the answer. So my answer was, I just keep at it. But how do you think you get there?
I think I keep at it. Absolutely. I mean, for me, I know there were a couple of times where you had to probably kind of be rolling your eyes a little bit, where we were in Colorado and I was getting my words in. Like, okay, I got to get my words in.
No, I wasn't rolling my eyes, but it's not my speed. Like the idea of like, I didn't want to do it at all. I was like, fuck that. I'm not writing.
Yeah. And I wasn't getting like a ton of stuff in, and I definitely can feel that my words are much better back home than they were there, where I was just getting them in to get them in. But for me, that unbroken chain is really important. If I unplug, I stop, and then I have to start again, there's always a lag. It always takes me time to get up to speed. I was just telling Johnny how many words I hit this morning, or today so far. And he was like, whoa, dude. And it's because I don't normally hit those, but it's only because I'm stacking, I'm building, and I'm really paying attention to what's working now and what's not. And, we had that whole idea with marginal gains. But now it's on an outline and a writing level. I'm just making sure that every book that I'm writing right now is straight up. The outline is better than the one before. And that's been true for the last 5 outlines. Like everything's been better than the one before. And the books, just make sure they're each one is better. I do have something interesting that, I think it's just a matter of you cultivate that by really paying attention to what works for you. And if you're in a collaborative relationship, know that everything is unique, and you find the way that works best for you. So we've always known that you and I, Johnny, work very differently than Dave and I, for example, right? And so I'm starting a new collaboration with Jen, and that's very different too, because every single person is going to bring something different to both the storytelling pre-production part and the narrative and then the post-production. And it's about how can you give your best and make sure that your partner is going to give their best, but you're kind of doing it in the way that makes most sense for you. So, I think after this many years, all of us, like the 3 of us in any combination, Johnny, you and I totally know what works for us. And now that we're actually in a really good place because we've got a lot of stuff figured out and we're trying to kind of close boxes. But on the other hand, we know who we are. We don't have a lot of like smarter artist clutter. And our horizon looks really good because now we know what kind of storytellers we are. We know how we work together, and we know what we're trying to accomplish in the next couple of years. Same with Dave and I. We know what we're trying to do. We've done it for a long time. We've actually got all of our boxes closed. So we've got some really cool stuff that we can build in the future. And we know how we work best together. And we're actually starting to iterate in that way. And then the stuff with Jen is brand new. It's just getting started. So we don't have any of the old preconceptions there, and we're able to build something from scratch. So I think you cultivate that by just making sure that you're paying attention to the big things and the small things. You're paying attention to how you communicate with your collaborators, even if that's yourself, because I've seen that over and over and over and over, that authors tell themselves certain stories. And it could just be as simple as the one that I was telling myself, and I do every time I write. And I can't stop myself from telling the story that I'm not as good in the evening, but I can tell myself not to listen to that story and say, you know what, maybe he's right, but I'll check it in the morning. And what I have done in the past is, oh, that asshole's right. I suck after 5, so I'm not even going to write. And that doesn't serve me either, because then I break my momentum.
One of the things that I have, if we're talking about journey, that I have learned more and more as time goes on, and there's going to be an obvious way, like a head nodding sort of response to what I'm about to say, I think, but I've learned it in an even more fine pointed way. And that's that the better I understand what I'm going to write in advance, the more flow and confidence I have. And this is the point where we go, yes, of course. But I actually think that that doesn't mean that I need a great outline. Now, we do work with beats and outlines, and I do want to understand those, but I actually don't think that that's the key thing to getting flow. I think that I can work. I think I probably could pants somewhat if I understand the scene really well. So in other words, I don't know that I do want the big picture, and that's the way we've operated. But because I'm more analytical about this over the past few weeks and months, because I've needed to, like it required a diagnostic. And what I'm noticing is any individual scene. So for instance, in a great outline that contains a great first scene, like the scene, I understand the scene, but I need to that scene is still hard until I really get a feel for the characters, until I really get a feel for what are their voices like, what are their motivations. And that's all stuff that no matter how good the outline is, you don't typically know until further into the story, which is why that first scene for me, outline or no outline, is hard, is because I have to get to know those characters. I have to get to know their rhythm. If it's a later book in a series, I have to relearn it. So I'm writing a 4th book in a series right now, and that's a little cold because I wrote the 3rd book a while ago. And so when I wrote the first scene, it's like a cold start. It's like a cold morning, and your car doesn't want to start quite right because the machine parts aren't warmed up. And I think that I probably could pants something now. It would be harder. It would meander. Like, it would be harder to get the arcs right. But I think I could do it if on a scene-by-scene basis I really, really understood it. So, Sean, the project that I'm talking about here, I ran into some stuff today where there was a divergence. Now, I've been pretty good about sticking to the outline, but one major character who eluded death in the last book looks like the motherfucker might elude death, at least through most of this book. Like,
what?
He's just...
You need me to help?
He was supposed to die.
He might.
And I didn't...
I'll be the henchman.
I didn't kill him, and now I'm thinking, just because of something happened, and I was like, okay, I want him to go in that direction, and now it doesn't make sense to kill him in the next scene he's in, which is the way the outline calls for it. But because that happened, I needed to kind of sit down and say, okay, well, why is he doing that? Why? And a lot of that is stuff that never actually makes the scene. I just need to understand it. So that's what I've done more and more, is just trying to, okay, do I understand, if it's going to be a fight scene, do I understand how they get into it? Like, there are certain sort of submodalities of a scene that I want to understand. So I might not need to understand, I can't think of something I might not need to understand, but in a particular, like, if a fight is going to come, if an argument is going to come, the specific submodality that helps me best is what the sequence that leads to it. So somebody's going to get mad throughout the scene and they aren't mad at the beginning. What's the sequence that's going to happen to get them there? And I don't plot that out. I just need to understand it. And so I guess that's what I'm saying, is it's a clarification on the thing that we've all said amongst ourselves, is that understanding in advance makes you move faster. Is I just had a little more clarity on that.
I have a question completely unrelated to the topic at hand, but I just thought of it.
Lots of sit-ups.
Oh, okay. Never mind. And the question was, how do I get my penis bigger? Thank you for answering.
That's right.
No, when you're writing something that puts you in a dark mood, or just, I don't know, maybe you don't write that kind of stuff as much, but when you're writing something where it's very emotional and it's taxing on you, do you carry that into your life?
I can think of one project in particular it was actually the project we talked about in the last episode, that I said that it had the same ending as La La Land before we wrote it, before La La Land, that was really hard to write. Well, no, it wasn't hard to write. It was emotionally hard to write. The scenes actually came off very easily, but I just remember, because it was like a romance gone bad sort of thing, and I just felt like I needed to go out and hug my wife when I was done. It was depressing. And particularly good scenes will stick with me in that way, but I'm sure you guys can relate to this. Like, a sad or tragic scene doesn't have the same kind of punch as it does for a reader for me. It's more like Robin will read something that I wrote and be like, oh, why did you kill them off? But I'm like giddy when I kill them off, not in a Dave way.
Dave too.
I thought not
in a Dave way, but because wow, that was really artistically interesting to me, sort of a way. Like, the way that it came about is interesting to me. There's not a lot of tragedy in those things. So, but there's usually some emotional resonance for the particularly strong scenes that stick with me. What about you?
Well, for me,
I wasn't asking you, but you can go.
Oh, well,
go ahead. You started.
Yeah, for me, occasionally, yes, I have to go deep. I actually go deeper, not when I'm writing it, but when I'm revisiting it. So,
you talked about this with me recently, didn't you? Something about some of the CI storylines that you didn't want to go too deep on.
Oh yeah, the last one was like, I don't want to go deeper than that ever. Like, the last thing that we did, the fourth No Justice book, that's the, like, I don't want to go farther than that.
It sounds like a challenge.
Yeah, like,
until we get to 5.
No, Dave really I was with him, and I'll follow Dave into battle anywhere. That's fine. But the last book challenged me. Like, it was definitely a little more. I think I would have had an easier time. I actually mean this, and I've never thought about it until just right now. But I think I would have had an easier time writing those scenes than I did editing. And
that's exactly the difference. I feel like I was just saying.
Yeah. So, and actually, I like talking about this because I didn't realize that before. But it's true. When I write my own stuff, like, yeah, it could be a little bit hard, but then I go out and like talk to my family and go on a walk. I'm fine. As long as I don't get Dave on the phone, I'm in a good mood.
And you're in a different mode. Your brain is engaged with the task of creating this horrible thing in a weird way.
Yeah. So that doesn't, like, I can get like emotional if something emotional has to happen, but usually the emotions hit me a lot harder when I'm rediscovering the work, whether it's something one of you guys have written or something I've written myself. Because and you guys will totally understand this. Maybe Johnny more so than Dave. I'm not really sure. But for me, I almost always forget what I wrote until I go back.
I do too.
And Dave, how often do you forget what you wrote when you go back?
Like reading it triggers the memories usually. I don't think I often forget something. Like I even can remember sometimes where I was at when I was writing the scene.
I can sometimes for sure.
I have
absolutely
that location awareness.
Yeah, but I also, there are times when I will read a few thousand words and I don't remember a word. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know where that came from, but
that's
awesome.
What King said about Cujo.
And what's funny is I thought he was a lying pile of shit when I read On Writing all those years ago, because I'm like, how could
or on drugs or something?
Well, yeah, he was on drunk and drugs, and I'm not either. But I do feel like there's things that I don't see how you could create something and then totally forget creating it. But I know from history that I have written things and I go back and read them and it's like a stranger has written them. So that's interesting to me. And I think that's something that happens a lot. And it shows you that you're like in the story and it's just happening, to Johnny's point earlier, you're kind of just transcribing it from the big story place onto the page. And so I really like that. But then when I go back and I don't know what's coming, I don't remember the words, I don't remember the order, and I'm reading it as a reader, it can hit me pretty hard. And there's been many times where I'm like polishing something and I'll lose it. I'll start like, I've cried, but it doesn't happen when I've never cried while writing something. I've cried while editing many, many times.
In answer to the question, yeah, and not just temporarily, like for weeks, I'll be in a dark mood. Right?
No, I don't believe that.
Yeah, I find it. I don't know. Like sometimes I'll just like thinking of the horrible things, like, oh, that'll be awesome to write. But then when I'm actually writing it and I'm experiencing it through the characters' heads, I just feel absolutely fucking awful, and it depresses me. Yeah, so I don't know. Sometimes I'll go several weeks or even months where I'm just kind of like, when I'm writing it, I'm just fucking down. And I'm thinking, who's going to read this goddamn thing? Yeah.
Oh, well, that doesn't feel like a good note to end on, but that is
kind of how I feel about the show.
Ending of it. Right, exactly. So maybe it is. Dave's journey is into weeks of bad feelings. Well, I think that the important thing is that we do continue to learn, and we continue to relearn the lessons that we already knew, which was sort of the point that I was trying to make. Is there's nothing surprising to me about flow. I knew that when I was writing back in 2006 or whenever it was, but or 2000. But rediscovering it, really realizing that that's something that I need to cultivate and nurture is important. All right, so that's the show, I guess. I feel like that was just kind of a loose end, but that's okay.
It did turn in from a loose end to a like winding non sequitur to goodbye.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to tell a little story to end it?
Well, no, it's not necessary. Maybe next week.
All right. So you heard that the tagline is "It's not necessary." So we'll talk to you guys.
It's a show.
It's a show.
It is a podcast.
Yeah.
Adios, everyone. Until next week.
Bye-bye.